All right, so it's officially 2 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I have 80 slides to get through and 45 minutes to do that. So here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and talk to you guys today about the art of BEC. And the initial name of the presentation when I submitted it was What 3 Years of Fighting Has Taught Us. I actually looked and I realized I was like, crap, I've actually been doing this stuff for 4 years. So kind of slight changing of the name and whatnot. And then I also switched jobs and everything. So this name of the talk is actually what 4 years and 9 months at Agari teaches the world about BEC. So I'm going to go ahead and get kicked off. So a little bit about myself. My name is Ronnie Tokazowski, senior threat researcher with Agari. I'm on Agari's asset team. To put that into context, what we do is we troll Nigerians, and we work to put it lightly. And what we do is we go ahead and try and figure out how a lot of this stuff works, and that's what I'll be talking to you guys about today. I'm also a hacker of things. Some of you guys may know me as I Heart Malware on the Twitter sphere. I also like cooking too. So if you guys want to exchange cooking recipes, if you guys want to talk fermenting vegetables and whatnot, I'd be more than happy to do that. In the past, I've done a lot of work on the APT side. APT1 was my jam there for a while. Also did some work on the Crimer side with the Dyer family malware. And I also like trolling and just having fun because InfoSec is very hard for a lot of people. And it's just if we laugh and have fun, it makes it so much more better. So the things I'll be talking about today, I will go ahead and be talking about what the industry defines as business email compromise. And there's a definition of what the industry calls it. And there's a definition of what people who are actually fighting this stuff on a day-to-day basis call it. I'll show you guys what both definitions of that are. I'll go ahead and talk to you about romance scams and how that plays into BEC. And I'll also be talking about a lot of the other overlapping crimes that are associated with BEC as well. I'll show you guys some bad rap videos as associated with a lot of the Nigerian fraud. And now I'll go ahead and talk to you guys about where we can go from here and how do we actually start combating this stuff. I also have lulls of BEC. So if you are familiar with the Mallies that usually happen at like FireEye Summit and MirCon, it's a lot of really funny, dumb things that make you tilt your head and go, WTF. And we've seen a lot of really interesting things by the actors. So we'll go ahead and laugh about that. For some of the material that I will be talking about, some of the material is TLP red. So that means for TLP red, that means if you're in this room, it doesn't go outside of that and everything. TLP white is something you tell your grandmother. TLP green is something you could tell a friend. TLP amber is something you could tell a colleague. And TLP red is seriously, don't go outside of that. However, I got the approval to talk on some of this stuff at the TLP white level. Just because this is the last Derbycon. This is my first Derbycon. This is the first Derbycon I'm speaking at, and this is the last Derbycon I'm speaking at. So all of the material is now considered TLP white. So thank you to the victim who gave us the permission to be able to use that, and you'll be meeting her here shortly. Disclaimer, BEC is nasty, and there's a lot of topics I'm going to be covering here. Some people may find it offensive and whatnot. I'm not a person to sugarcoat things. I'm going to tell you all the truth and how it is, and if it's something where if it's awkward for y'all, I'm sorry, but this is just the nature of the beast and everything. And most importantly, just be excellent to each other. The BEC stuff and a lot of the stuff that's going on from the psychological side, it's hard. It's rough. And there's a lot of victims out there who's seeing a lot of this stuff, and they're the ones who are being affected the most of this. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. What is BEC? So initially when people think of BEC, and when we talk about BEC, if you go and do a quick Google search of what BEC is in the industry, it's usually something simple. Most people will see, okay, my CFO received an email from pretending to be the CEO, and as I go through and everything, the CEO is like, hey, can you go ahead and do a wire transfer for me? CFO is like, yep, I'll do the transfer for you. And then at that point, and they'll go ahead and continue talking back and forth. An account will be funded to the CFO or the victim, and then the money gets wired, and it's gone from there. On the surface, it may seem very simple like that, but there's actually a little bit more to it. So I started looking at this stuff back in June of 2015. I was over at FishMe, and our CFO had received an email, and he said, hey, what is this? I don't get it. So we took that email, we responded back to the scammer, and we were like, oh, hey, the CFO, he's out of the office, but I'll be more than happy to respond. I'll be more than happy to handle that request. So, but to the attacker, they didn't know this was somebody in the middle of that conversation. So we went ahead and we worked with them. We got a bank account. We sent them a link. We got that person to click the link and everything. We thought we were hot stuff at that point. We're like, yes, we're engaging with the actors. We're doing active defense. Not hacking back. That's something different. But we thought we were really cool doing that. And then as we started looking at that from like June 2015 to December 2015, BEC started becoming a problem. It just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The more we looked at it, the more we started talking with people. So I was introduced to an agent from up in New York, and I was talking with him. I'm like, hey, there's a lot of people in the industry who's seeing this stuff. Let's go ahead and actually start trying to combat this stuff. I said, let's go ahead and try to do some collaboration between the private sector and between law enforcement to start doing this stuff. And you could, and talking with him on the phone, you could tell him, he's like, yeah, whatever, tell a couple of your friends to come fight BEC. So I called him back 3 days later. I said, hey, is the Bureau ready? He's like, what do you mean is the Bureau ready? I said, I've got 100 other security researchers who are ready to start socially engineering these people and feeding you guys intelligence. I said, are you ready for the flow? And you could tell his jaw just dropped on the floor. He's like, what? So at that point, he was able to go and get a couple of more people to come help out with that and everything. And at that point, we had another 10 agents on there, and that was when the BEC list was born. It's an environment where we can share information at the TLP red level, and a bunch of people, and it's very operational. And then we were like, yes, 110 people, we can go and fight this Nigerian fraud thing. We've got this. And the more we started looking at it, we realized we don't got this. We realized that little red dot that you see up there, that was us at the time. That was our knowledge of what we thought BEC was. And 3 years in, as we started looking at it, we're like, okay, we have a little bit of an idea on what BEC is. We know a little bit of the intricacies that work on it. And at that point, we're like, okay, we've had over 100 arrests. We've stopped millions of dollars. Thousands of romance accounts have been whacked. And it was still going on. There was still problems with it, and we couldn't understand why. And it's like governments were working together. We were working with Secret Service, IRS, and a ton of other people to just try to get ahead of this and get an understanding of that. So now that we're 3 years in, where did we stand at that point? What did we really learn? So to put this in iceberg format, this is about where we were right around December of 2018. And that was kind of where we were. And as we kept going, we were like, okay, there's a lot more to this. So from somebody who fights this stuff on a day-to-day basis, from somebody who works with a lot of law enforcement, what is the actual definition of BEC? To put it very lightly, BEC is a dumpster fire. But not just one dumpster fire, it's actually about 6 dumpster fires. But then again, what you need to do is take those 6 dumpster fires and then throw ninjas on top of that. And then if you have a couple photoshopped raptors holding bombs and have some more fire and then have people throwing gasoline on top of it, that's pretty much where that's where BEC stands. It's an absolute mess. And I can prove that mathematically. I can prove that this is actually a dumpster fire and it's a mess. So there were statistics that came out through IC3, and in 2015, the total known losses to BEC fraud has doubled every single year since 2015. And okay, that was one number that came out. What are some other numbers that came out? When it comes to doing fraud, I like to look at the numbers that come out of FinCEN because they're kind of the governing body that sees a lot of this stuff, and they work back and forth with financials. So for all of 2018, they came out and they said, we have lost $300 million per month. And so it was a total of $3.6 billion for all of 2018. And with a lot of numbers like that, it could be like, okay, $300 million, what's that mean in context? So I'm a reverse engineer by trade. I did a lot of reversing of malware back in my day. So I'll go ahead and convert it into malware losses for some of y'all. So let's take a look at Game Over Zeus. Made headlines. It was something where it caused a lot of problems. Operated for 2 years. The total losses associated with Game Over Zeus was $100 million. What we call that on a day of fighting BEC is we call that 10 days. In the case of WannaCry, something that claimed national headlines, estimates for the damage were $4 billion in damage. And okay, I'll go ahead and it was a marketing number. Some security company pulled it out of their butts on that one and whatnot, but I'll go ahead and I'll give it to them and whatnot for this. We call that 13 months of fighting BEC. Let's go ahead and take a look at a more recent one, GanCrab. They were like, we went ahead and we did $300 million in damages. They went ahead and cashed out, had all this money, and again, that's called 1 month. NotPetya, $1.2 billion in global damages. That was 4 months. For you guys who remember looking at Sony and the attacks associated with that, the losses were estimated to be, the IT loss costs were $35 million, or possibly up to $100 million. Again, going back to that marketing word, or that marketing total, that was, because marketing teams would never inflate numbers in order to make them look big. And that is called 3.5 days or 10 days of fighting BEC. And again, another more recent arrest. Let's go ahead and take a look at Ghaznaim. Again, since 2016, that one was responsible for $100 million. Again, 10 days of fighting BEC. And I do want to kind of throw a disclaimer out there that when I went and crunched these numbers, that was just from the FinCEN numbers. There were new metrics that came out from the FBI talking about romance scams. and they were saying that let's see if I got it right, it was $362 million was lost to romance scams for 2018. And there was a bunch of other numbers that have come out since then. I was feeling too lazy to actually go back and crunch those numbers to see what they would be. So those numbers are actually really big. So it's actually the opposite of this case, where there's actually a lot more losses going on than people realize. So joking aside, numbers aside, what is BEC? So as we understand, business email compromise is kind of becoming a lot morphed and everything. There's a lot more going on with it. So one of the things that are associated with it is we know romance scams are very closely tied to it. Wire fraud, obviously something in there. Something that most people don't realize is lottery scams. Carding also plays into that. Phishing kits, account takeover. Reshipping scams, business email spoofing, aka what most people consider as BEC and not the actual compromise piece of it. As we continue going through that, there's other stuff that overlaps with this too. Craigslist scams are also related with BEC. Check fraud, very closely related to this. Mystery shopper scams, drug trafficking gets looped into that too. There's been some studies where romance victims are used as mules in order to go ahead and push money through. Work from home scams, document forging, and probably a dozen other types of Nigerian fraud that I'm missing. And when we look at BEC, the more we understand it, it's something where no matter how much an organization tries to say they do BEC, there is no single organization that exists that can solve every single one of these problems for you. And it's something where we all have to go ahead and come together to look at that. So you're probably looking at me kind of skeptical, be like, really? Romance scams? How does this have to do anything with BEC? What's the connections with it, Ronnie? Yeah, believe it or not, they're actually very much related. Anytime that you see a BEC scheme, if the attacker gives you an account that ties back to a name, more times than not, that name on that account is actually a romance victim. And the way that those work is another attacker will socially engineer the romance victim, and they will go ahead and tell the scammer who's doing the BEC, hey, here's a victim that you can go ahead and wire money to. And then once the wire goes out and everything, the romance scammer will work with the victim, or their romance client, as they call, and say, hey, you're going to be expecting a payment from a vendor for $25,000. Go ahead and take it and wire it out to this account. And in one case that we were looking at, actors are doing a lot more than just BEC schemes. With one of the attackers that we were looking at during our BEC engagements, they were doing Craigslist scams. They were sending fake checks. They were doing work from home scams. And also on the romance side, they were also engaged. They were targeting farmers dating. They were targeting people dating on Ashley Madison, BDSM dating websites, and tax fraud. And again, this was all literally the same inbox for the same scammer. So as we look at it and everything, when a lot of these romance scammers are actually engaged, a lot of the people who are doing this type of fraud don't actually say romance scammer or romance victim, because to them, the way that they describe it is that victim, scam, that's considered a dirty word. So when they're engaging with these people, they actually call them their clients. And it's something where that's one of the things that they help to legitimize that business of use them as mules in order to wire the stuff. So it's something where, again, if you see that bank account and if you see a name tied back to that, more times than not, that's something where that ties back to a romance victim, almost one-to-one in that case. And as you go ahead and look through it, it's like, okay, a romance victim, they should totally know they're part of this. They're dumb. Why don't they know? Well, if we start looking at psychology, something that is, again, completely outside of bits and bytes of InfoSec, does anybody remember dating before now? Does anybody dating back in the day where you actually had to muster up the courage and go talk to that significant other? Hey, you're cute, I want to talk to you, can I buy you a drink? And something where we had to muster up that courage. If that person was sitting there with a group of people, we may not want to go talk to that people because we may not have the confidence to do that. However, now in the dating scene, it's something where all you need is an app on your phone and you can pick it up and start dating and talking to people. And there's no fear of rejection when trying to talk back and forth with people. And people will have a lot more confidence as talking back and forth to individuals on the internet, for better or for worse. If you want some really fun stories, check out our Tinder on Reddit. Lots of really, really funny things that happen there. And additionally, when people are talking on the internet, people lie. And as quoted by Abraham Lincoln, it's something where as we go through this, people are able to go ahead and hide who they are. And this is how a lot of these scammers work, is they'll use fake accounts of fake personas in order to start engaging with these victims to socially engineer them. As for the prime targets of a lot of these things, people are either single, divorced, or widowed. And it's people like this who end up being part of that and being pulled into that. And when you actually start looking at the psychology of this, if we all remember back to high school health class, one of the biggest stressors that we have in life is losing a spouse, losing a significant other. And in almost every case that I've seen where there's a victim, in the case of romance scams, it's something where that person is just lonely. I was on my way to Black Hat a couple weeks back and everything, and I hopped in an Uber ride and everything. I got to talk to a lady who was there, and I was saying I do security research and everything, work on romance scams. She's like, she's like, funny that you do that. She's like, I got a story for you. She's like, I was a romance victim. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah, I lost $500,000. I'm like, what? I'm like, okay, go ahead and tell me a little bit about it and everything. She's like, so I lost, she's like, I lost my house, I lost my home, I lost my husband, I lost custody of my kids, and the reason I'm an Uber driver is because I had to file bankruptcy for my business. She was like, I was a couple years away, I had a good business, I was looking to, the way it was working was I was going to invest into a business in Nigeria, and she just got on the wrong side of that and everything. And I told her, I said, I'm curious, what was it that was so enticing from the romance side that got you engaged in that and everything? And you could tell that it was kind of not really a hurtful question and everything, but it was hard for her. And she's like, my husband was abusive to me, and this person came in and was saying the right words in the right order and was showing me love. And as humans, that's all we want, is that's just part of our human nature, is we want to be loved by somebody else. And that's not a bad thing. So in order to engage with romance victims, one of the things that the scammers will do is they'll use what they call romance scripts or formats. So I want to go ahead and introduce you to Larry. He's 62 and widowed. He has both 3, 2, and 3 kids. And the way that this works is they will go ahead and use scripts like this in order to copy paste back and forth to their victims. And the reason that they do this is because they don't have to go ahead and engage with somebody else, and they can go ahead and just copy paste this and not think about it. Some of the scripts and formats that I've seen will go up to 28 layers deep before the actor actually has to think about having a response back to them. And it's one of those things where in many cases there's actually debugging information so that if your victim becomes aware of some of what's going on, they can go ahead and change that. And it's something where it's not just elderly who's being targeted too. They have fetish-based scripts as well. Say that 5 times fast. And in this case, one of the scripts that we were looking at from the actor, they were assuming the role of a dominatrix, and they said, you're going to go ahead and buy this sex kit, and you're going to go ahead and use gift cards in order to pay for it. And we actually had to have a serious conversation at work on whether being told to go buy gift cards, which is being told to go do something, was actually part of, if it was actually legitimate. So it was something where we came to the determination, no, that being told to go buy gift cards, even though being told to do something is part of the kink, that what we came to the conclusion was that no, it's still considered a scam. And when you actually talk with a lot of the victims, the attackers actually use them as human proxies. So if money needs to be wired from one point to another, they'll go ahead and say, hey, go ahead and go do this for me. Go open me a bank account. I'm going to go ahead and send you fake checks. Or not fake checks. I'm going to go ahead and send you some checks. I need you to go ahead and ship them out. And a lot of the victims I've spoken with, a lot of the victims I've heard, a lot of the stories I've seen, they actually feel like they're in a relationship. They actually think that what they're doing is for their lover. In some cases, I've seen up to 10 years for victims who are being part of this and everything. And it's something where it's absolutely heartbreaking to see that a lot of them feel that a lot of them feel like they're in a relationship. The problem with that is now when you go ahead and you go talk with that victim, that everything that they know for that relationship over the last 10 years is wrong. Now that victim starts questioning a lot of what they do. So from a psychological perspective, there's a lot of damage that happens there. And it's something where it's really hard to deal with a lot of them. And unfortunately, suicide and depression is something that goes hand in hand with a lot of this stuff. And I've seen many victims who unfortunately have taken their lives because they feel like they have given all their money out to the scammer and they have nothing else to live for. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of the beast, is that a lot of these actors actually have blood on their hands now because this is kind of how far that they're pushing some of the people. But as information security professionals, we're like, okay, a lot of these users, they're dumb. Why? They should have known better. They should have known that they were as part of the scam. But one of the things you have to keep in mind is there's also a generation gap. A lot of people are not wired like all of us. A lot of people don't question whether this toaster that I just bought that has a Wi-Fi chip in it is going to be phoning home to China. Your regular general public does not give a crap about that. Does it make toast? That's what they care about. And that's something where just because people have different knowledge, it doesn't make them less stupid than the other. It's just as we went through life, we all gained different sets of knowledge. So do you know what the logistics are in order to go ahead and what the costs are for gasoline in order to get from one place to another? Can you identify the HIV proteins that are associated with that? And it's something where most people in here can't answer that. Hell, I can't answer that. But it's something where, again, we all gain different knowledge as we're going through. And it's something where just because a lot of these scammers are working back and forth with people, again, it doesn't make somebody more or less stupid than the other. It's just we have different knowledge as we've gone through. And a lot of people are not naturally skeptical of everything. And believe it or not, we are the weird ones. We're the ones who question everything. And when we go outside to go talk with the people who are walking on the street, they're the ones who are not seeing this. And they're like, okay, yes, I have a toaster and it works. Yeah, I connect to my Wi-Fi and it works. What's the problem there? So it's something where we need to actually stop having this elitist attitude on a lot of this stuff and actually start having a little compassion for people, because it's one of those things where these are the people who are associated with this scheme. These are the people who are stealing billions of dollars from our companies. This is now our problem. It's not BEC is not just a tech problem anymore. It's now becoming a people problem. Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit of a sidestep. So one of the things that we do a lot of work with at Agari is we do a lot of active engagements, and we actually engage with the scammers. And we have some internal tools that are proprietary that we gain a lot of visibility into how a lot of this stuff works. So we were looking at one of our accounts that we had, and we went ahead, and as we were going through, we were able to see that there was a lot of communications back and forth. But when we were looking at one of the actors, we saw, okay, the Jim Blackie account, there was a lot of information there, and there was a lot of information going back with the Susan White. And it was something where we didn't really understand what all was going on there. As we started looking at it, we use a tool that can go ahead and start clustering and looking at a lot of that information to understand what was going on. And kind of start looking at some of the keywords that was going on. And you see things like love and baby and things like that. So we knew at that point this was more than likely a romance victim that we were looking at, that the scammer was interacting with. And again, that we were tipped off to this as part of a BEC engagement, and they were doing BEC in the same account. So once we go ahead and start looking at the actor-scammer communication, we were able to find this one here. And again, Susan is not her actual name. We kind of masked that in order to protect her identity. But you see here, my tax guy just asked me about my 401k, hoping that I did not just cash it out. I'm going to owe taxes on that, and I had to owe $60,000 on, or it was $60,000 for a 401k. And as you see, there's a couple other letters on there. You see the MSN, FNP, CCDS. And with those letters, she was a nurse. And those are actual nursing certificates. She has a degree and everything. And it was something where, again, she wouldn't really remind you of what a typical dumb user is, as quote. So I can go ahead and keep saying her story and everything, but the person who says it best is actually herself.
I joined Matt, started looking at some of the profiles and the pictures. I think the most handsome...
Could I get the...
I joined Match.com, started, looking at some of the profiles and the pictures. I think the most handsome gentleman that I saw on there was Jim Blackie. I sent a message to him. He told me what he did, and he told me that he was a civil engineer and built roads and rail. You could tell he was very, very excited that he got this contract. He didn't tell me how much it was worth, but said that it was a very lucrative contract for him, and he couldn't pass it up. And he would be going to South Africa. The first time he asked me for money, he said, if you could just send me $10,000, I can pay for some workers to do the work until I can figure out what to do about this other situation. I went to my church, and I prayed, because I didn't know what to do. He asked me again for the money, and he basically wore me down. When it came time for him to be paid for the job and to leave, he said that there was a problem with the amount of money. So he sent me an email telling me that they paid him $30 million to do this job. His reason that he couldn't get the money was that the South African government wouldn't allow that amount of money to leave the country for some reason. After a few days, I sent a few $1,000s. I figured it out pretty quickly, what to say and where to go and how much money I could send without really being questioned. So I got cash advances on credit cards, pretty much maxed out. Well, I did max out all my credit cards. I opened 1 or 2 other credit cards, and I took out, I think, 3 personal loans, each for about $20,000, $25,000 apiece, and wired those immediately. So my bank was, and they questioned me the most. And the woman that I was working with that helped me with the personal loan told me outright, she said, "We think this is fraud." I came up with an elaborate story as well. I was completely new to all of this. I mean, I had never taken out a personal loan before in my life. My credit score was 800. I had no debt. In the end, the cash that I sent him was about $400,000 because I ended up refinancing my home. So I really, really needed someone to come to me with some solid evidence that this wasn't real. And I hired the private investigator. She didn't find anything. She could only say that I'm suspicious, but I can't tell you what it is. I'm just kind of been lost and alone in this because I haven't told anyone. No one knew what was going on with my situation or why all my money was gone, why I had to sell my house and move, why I had to take my kids out of their school. Until I got an email from you.
And at that point, we had reached out to her in order to because we saw that she was a victim. And we started working with her in order to go ahead and actually start trying to build a case against the people who were scamming her because we had an idea of who it was, where they were coming from. So we went forward with that. So she said the most attractive person that she saw in there was Jim Blackie. I don't know if people read micro expressions in here, but if you saw in the beginning, she had a slight smile when she said that. So even after losing all that money, there was still some happy emotions associated with that. So let's go ahead and take a look at who Mr. Blackie is. So, as you see, he's a businessman, likes to travel first class, somewhat well-dressed, decent-looking guy, and he likes drinking, he seems to like drinking champagne, not champagne, but cocktails, and likes to travel. But unfortunately, as we started looking at this, those were actually stolen pictures. And it's something where a lot of people, when they look at active defense, they're like, okay, active defense is a buzzword, people are not doing it, and it's something where it's just a marketing term in order to go ahead and try and make $1. Well, so I will actually have a counter argument to that, as this was the last email that she had received. And the reason she had received this from Mr. Blackie was because the actors' worlds may have been closing down on them. Because let's just say that people started getting arrested when this stuff went down. So let's actually take a look at who the scammer was. Again, this is an active case, so I'm going to go ahead and leave his name as redacted. But once he learned that his accomplices were starting to be arrested, he decided to flee from South Africa and went back home to Nigeria. Unfortunately, with this individual, we only knew about 4 of his passports, and he ended up going out on the 5th one. But for the group, there was a total of 5 individuals involved, and 4 of them have been arrested. Again, can't really talk much on that case because it's still pending, and hopefully, once it comes out, we'll be releasing more information on it. But 4 of the 5 people have been arrested on that. So let's go ahead and actually look at some of the social media that this person was posting out there. So on Mr. Redacted's Instagram post, if you don't learn how to get paid sleep, you'll work until you die. So that was one of his views on some of this stuff, is you gotta go ahead and keep going. He also liked really, really, really expensive cars. This was one of his Mercedes that he had. And here's another picture of him in a decent-looking hotel. Turns out it was his birthday that day, and he had a lot of people actually like that and everything. I can't change the direction of my wind, but I can adjust the sails. Always reach my destination. And happy to make it this far. Happy birthday to myself. There's a little bit of arrogance there. He's like, oh, happy birthday to me. What a jerk. And as you can see, he also likes traveling business class. As he's sitting there sipping champagne and whatnot in one of the planes. And when I was actually redacting a lot of this stuff, I want to make a confession. This next picture I had a little bit of fun doing. So this was actually him and his buddies out in a nightclub. And they were sitting there drinking champagne and doing a lot of fun stuff and everything. And as you see, the facial expressions, the guy third from the left was actually a little bit drunk. He was like all like this and everything. One of the people who posted back is like, hey, Mr. Redacted, why is your mouth open? And he's the one sitting there going like this and whatnot. And then don't worry about Mrs. Packwoman there on the right and everything. But yeah, this is kind of some of the stuff that they're doing and that they're sharing. So as we go ahead and start looking at this, we know it's a big problem. And okay, who do we go ahead and blame for this and everything? So a lot of people will point to social media and be like, hey, social media, you need to do more on this. Banks, you need to do more on this. Law enforcement, you need to arrest more people and everything. Private industry, you refuse to work with law enforcement. If anybody has followed anything with Apple, they straight up just won't do anything for law enforcement. You have service providers and everything. They're like, well, the service providers need to actually stop this stuff. They should be doing more on it. But at the end of the day, we actually need to be pointing back at ourselves on a lot of this, because it's something where law enforcement cannot make arrests until we actually work with them. They can't make arrests if they don't know who's being victimized. And if we're seeing that stuff, we need to actually work with them in order to start closing that. And likewise, banks cannot actually close those accounts because they don't know about it. If I go ask my bank to open an account, they know I've been a customer for that's not going to flag. But if they know that I'm opening it they won't know that I may be opening that account for a scammer. So a lot of the scammers know that a lot of these victims that they're working with, they know that a lot of the victims that they're working with have decent credit, have good accounts, have that reputation. So that's why a lot of the stuff flies under the radar like that. Private industry has to work in order to go ahead and actually identify this stuff. And that social media profile that added you as a romance scammer, that looks like a romance scammer, did you actually report that up to their social media platform, or did you just ignore it and go along? And even just something as simple as reporting that one Facebook profile that adds that friend request to you, that's something where you may be helping 3 other people in doing that, and helping 3 other people who aren't able to see the difference in that. And it's something where with a lot of the sharing that's going on, there needs to be more sharing on the BEC space. It's something a lot of the actors are sharing information too. And it's a lot of the ways that they'll do it is they'll be like, hey, does anybody have a drop in North Carolina with bank name here? And that what they'll do is they'll use locations for the victims in order to help the transfers look even more legitimate. So for example, if you're a business in North Carolina that wires money to an account in North Carolina, that is an account that's been stood up for a while, that's going to be less likely to be picked up. And from a lot of those fraud and protection pieces that we put in, it's going to completely blow by all of them. And it's something where it's not just the banks and everything, it's all the social media platforms that and all of the other accounts out there too and everything, and all the other providers. Is a lot of this stuff flies under the radar just because it's legitimate accounts being used for bad things. And a lot of people are like, where do they share information? Where do they actually go ahead and engage with a lot of these things? Well, they share it in the open. Take a look at spammer. Go to Facebook. Take a look at spammer family groups. And most of them should have been shut down by now. Because I know Krebs did a whole post that took I think it was like 260,000 260,000 accounts and profiles down. So as associated with a lot of people who were sharing stuff back and forth. And here you can see that somebody needed cPanel access, and what they would do with that is they would go ahead and use that in order to upload different phishing kits. They would use HTTPS credentials in order to go ahead and make it to where as they go to a phishing landing pages, that now bypasses our IDS systems, and that goes all the way through and everything. And account takeover is something that plays very much into this. And in a lot of these groups and everything, not even Fortnite is safe from a lot of these stuff. So we were looking at one where one of the scammers was selling Fortnite accounts and everything. And again, you may be looking at me a little bit skeptical, going, "Really? Okay, credential phishing. How are you tying credential phishing back to BEC? What's the relationship there?" There's no relationship whatsoever. But it's something where I had an agent early on in my career. He said, "Ronnie, one of the things when you look at a lot of these criminals who are doing different things, that criminals don't do just one type of thing. Someone may be doing carding, somebody may be doing this, but it's never just one type of fraud that a lot of these actors are doing." So one of the actors that we were looking at the time was they were doing tax fraud, they were doing credential phishing, wire fraud, they were doing BECs, credit card fraud, they were using lead generation services that most of your marketing teams are using right now. They were using invoice redirection or malwareless attack, because I had to throw at least one buzzword in here. And they were buying RDP sessions. They had a senior match account. They were laundering gift cards on taxable.com, and where they can go ahead and take a gift card and convert it over to Bitcoin and sell it for 70% of the profit. They were doing check fraud and carding, and they were actually monitoring credit on some of the accounts and everything. And I had to actually had to use small font in order to squeeze all of this information there. And again, this was one account, and the account that we like to call this is, we like to call this Scattered Canary. And what we did was we took a look at, and when we released the report on this, we looked at 10 years of history and how BEC grew, how one individual grew from doing Craigslist scams to check fraud to romance scams to W-2 fraud to BEC, and we have that entire timeline. So I'd strongly encourage you guys to go check out that report. And just because I don't want you guys to have to go through our marketing portal and everything, do site agari.com, file type PDF, Scattered Canary, and Scattered Canary in quotes, and there you go. You'll pull the PDF right up and everything. So this is a lot of really bad stuff that's been going on, and as we're sitting here talking about it and everything. So what's Nigeria's perception on this? Do they see this as being something really bad, or are they more like, okay, whatever? So here's their perception on it.
Suffer no be small, upon say I get sense. Poverty no good at all, oh. Now him make I join this business. 419 no be cheap, it's just a game, everybody dey play am. If anybody follow me, my brother, I go jump am. National efforts na me get am. National Stadium, na me build am. President, na my sister, brother. You be the guru, I be the master. Ojibo man, I go chop your dollar. I go take your money, disappear. 419 is just a game. You are the loser, I am the winner.
So this is the way that a lot of them actually see 419 scams. It's something where the way that they justify it and the way that they see it is, if I can trick you out of $1, that dollar is now mine. And the exact word that they use is mugu. And when you actually translate it from Hassa, if I'm pronouncing that right, it actually translates to the word fool. So if they're able to fool and trick you out of that money, they're entitled to that. The other problem with that is a lot of them actually feel like when they're engaging with the victims, they're actually victimizing the person above that. They're victimizing the banks, they're victimizing the corporations. They're not actually hurting people is how they see it. However, that's actually that's absolutely false way to think of that, because again, there's people who are committing suicide because of this stuff, because they've just wired all their money out. So some people may have seen this and everything, because this is an old one. This has been out for several years now. So let's go ahead and take a look at what is modern pop culture doing and everything. So another rapper who came out with some songs talking about this stuff was Nine Ice, or I think it's pronounced nice. I don't know. But when you actually translate the lyrics, I want to be doing things, I want to be controlling things. Wire, it's worth the money. Money order, it's worth the money. So that's totally a song that's not about wire fraud. And that was one that came out back in, I think it was 2017 when that one came out. So what's the more recent things that are out there? So there was another rapper, Naira Marley and Z Latin, actually came out with a video called "Am I a Yahoo Boy?" So looking back at the history and what happened with this, he was actually doing a live stream, and in the stream he said that that we needed to pray for the Yahoo Boys, or the people who were doing the scam and what they call it back in Nigeria. He said we need to pray for the Yahoo Boys because they're the ones who are circling money for the economy, and he came under fire for that. And the reason that he came under fire for that, because he's sitting there saying, hey, wire fraud, good thing, go keep doing it. And a lot of people were upset with him for that and everything. And on May 9th, he actually released a rap video called Am I a Yahoo Boy? And if you go and pull the video up, it tells a story of where the EFCC went and arrested him, pulled his laptop, searched the laptop, found nothing, and then at the end of the video, he goes back out and ends up partying with the people. And incidentally enough, the EFCC was not pleased with that. So on May 10th, he was arrested for, wait for it, wire fraud. So it's something where people obviously are innocent until proven guilty. I don't have access to that case and everything, but it seems that there's a direct correlation with rappers who are singing praises of the Yahoo Boys and people who are actually doing wire fraud, incidentally. But on the counter side of that, not all Nigerians are scammers. And it's something where when Nine Ice released his video, there was another rapper that came out and said, hey, we need to stop glorifying the Yahoo Boys. These people are doing fraud. These people are hurting a lot of people, and we need to stop that. So what he did was he came out and he's like, we need to quit doing this. And I will go on record and say again, not all Nigerians are scammers. A lot of them are like me and you. A lot of them just want to go ahead and make the best lives they can for their family, and a lot of them are good, hardworking people. So again, contrary to popular belief, not all Nigerians are scammers. One of the YouTubers I like following, his name is Pleasant Green. Totally check him out. And what he'll do is he will actually go and apply to a lot of the fake positions that are out there, and he will actually create a vlog on that. One of the most recent ones he did was he actually went and got a job sending fake checks. And what he would do is he would take the fake checks. He knew that if he printed them out, it was going to be fraud. So he went and actually, in those checks, he said, hey, this check was being sent to you from a scammer. Whoever you were expecting this from, don't give them money. And interesting enough, when he sent that out, his employer actually got pissed with him. And he was like, I know you sent this stuff and everything. He's like, what do you mean I sent this stuff? He's like, I never did any of that. And the scammer actually posted a picture where one of the victims sent the scammer a picture of the letter that said that it was a scammer. And he's like, you're now cutting into my business and everything. And he's like, this wasn't a scam. But it turned out where it was and everything. And it got pissed and everything. And he, quote unquote, lost his job in doing that and everything. Another interesting one that came out is he's been poking a lot of these people for a pretty long time. They actually found his address, and they ended up like putting him on a couple mailing lists and sending him a bunch of stuff as well and everything. And he also helped an honest Kenyan try and raise money. And what he did was he gave the individual a camera so he could go take pictures in Kenya, or actually no, it was Ghana. Yeah, it was Kenya. And he had released a book to go ahead and help him give a legit reason in order to help make the money. And a lot of people are okay, why doesn't Nigerian law enforcement do more on this? They need to go ahead and be doing more in order to stop this. On the flip side, they're dealing with a lot more problems. They're dealing with people like Boko Haram and everything. And when doing a lot of the research for this presentation, one of the things that stuck out was a person who had joined Boko Haram because he was like, I have my family business, and they just started randomly killing people, and it was either I join Boko Haram or they kill me. And it's like, that's the choices some of these people have, is literally a life or death situation in order to do that. But on the flip side, actually, EFCC is starting to do a lot more work on this. And again, a lot of the Yahoo Boys are now running, which is great. And there's been some reports coming out that a lot of them are actually fleeing to Dubai and Ghana. So if anybody has law enforcement contacts in Dubai and Ghana, let's get them involved in this too. Again, with a lot of the scammers who are doing this stuff, a lot of them are like me and you. They just want to eat. They want to provide the best families. They want to provide the best they can for the families. And we were looking at one account where the guy had tried to apply for college, tried to get out of Nigeria for 16 months. And he worked hard in order to do that. He was applying for visas in Canada and other places and whatnot. And he eventually became a scammer because it was 16 months of rejection. And he's like, well, guess I gotta be a scammer. And again, it's a lot more than bad people doing bad things. It's just people who don't have a better opportunity to do better things. And on the flip side, a lot of the Yahoo Boys are actually building roads and building casinos and reinvesting the money back into Nigeria. So it's a very hard and complex problem from a socioeconomical perspective that, again, they just want the best lives for their people. So if all of us in here were in those shoes, what would we do? Would we be a scammer, or would we go and work 16 hours busting our backs? in order to make next to nothing, because the average salary in Nigeria is $3,000 per year. So again, where do we go from here? We know that BEC is bad, and it overlaps with over 9,000 types of crime. And again, it's much more than bad people doing bad things. And it's something where we have to start thinking outside the box in order to start addressing a lot of these problems. And it's something where, again, with how this stuff is structured, with how a lot of it works, we won't win this game alone. It's something where we actually have to start working together, and a divided house will fall. So we actually have to collaborate and actually communicate in order to do a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of places that we can actually share that information. Make friends with your local FBI field office, because they're the ones who can actually go after a lot of these attackers. And it's not something where it's too bad, but they're able to go ahead and do a lot of this stuff. File a report with IC3. Reach out to FS Isaac, Ren Isaac, and a lot of other places. There's a TLP White Slack as well, where you can go ahead and share a lot of information too. And I'll actually have a QR code where y'all can go ahead and hit the invite. And again, we need to start thinking differently, and we need to stop being a $16 billion statistic on this stuff, which is where we stand right now. And when I say $16 billion, that's not me pulling some random marketing number out of the air. That's actually confirmed losses with confirmed victims that are associated to that and everything. So that's where we stand right now as an industry. Since 2013, $16 billion has gone out to the door to BEC. And mathematically, we know that there's a lot of other things that don't get pulled into that number. Check fraud, W-2 schemes, romance scams doesn't get pulled into that. So there's a lot more going on there. So we need to start thinking differently and start trying to address a lot of this stuff. So with that, do we have any questions? And I've got 4 minutes. I'll do 3 minutes of questions, and then the last 1 minute, I'll go ahead and roll through the lulls of BEC really quick. Yes. Okay.
So I noticed that your first example on the experience and rappers
the connection. So the question was, what's the connection with South Africa for a lot of these scammers? A lot of the scammers will move out of Nigeria and go to other places as well. So some of them may go to South Africa, some of them may come here to the States. And it's something where a lot of them are Nigerians who live in other places, who's doing a lot of this stuff and whatnot. So, yeah. I don't have an answer on the percentage, unfortunately. So, but I would say a good bit. All right, yeah. The question was, are there other countries where this type of scams are coming out of? I know, not that I'm aware of, because I know that each country has slightly different things. So for example, Russia tends to be more malware focused and whatnot. In India, you tend to have more of the call centers down there. Brasilia, you tend to have more of the banking Trojans that come out of there and everything. So just really kind of a difference between where it's all coming from and kind of different flavors of it. Some people are kind of dabbling in other pieces and whatnot. And there's more than just Nigeria dabbling in romance scams right now. And then, yeah. Through the communications back and forth with the scammer, we were able to identify it through some of our proprietary tools that we were able to use in order to gain a lot of visibility into that. So we were able to kind of see that actor to communication, or actor to victim communication. To answer the next question that's going to come up for that and everything, no, we don't have somebody in Russia popping boxes. Yes, we work with law enforcement. Yes, we follow U.S. Code 181030 to the T. Sorry. And that was the last short, but I'll keep answering questions. Yeah. So personally, I'm cool with that and everything. When I go on the, and the reason is and whatnot is a lot of these scam when working with law enforcement, the biggest problem we have is the subpoena process. So in order to get any information back on an email account, it's 30 days to get that information back. By that point, your scammer can go and make 40 accounts in a day. Mathematically, that's a problem. So that's why a lot of those investigations take a long time to go. So I'll take one more question, then I'm going to roll through lulls. Yeah. Could you repeat that one more time? Oh yeah, the 81. Yeah. So the 81 arrests, that was not one of my cases. That was not directly tied to the stuff I have worked on, but I know the agents out there pretty well, and it's kind of as part of a lot of that collaboration. So I'm going to roll through lows of BEC really quick. When engaging with your CEO, this was actually an email back from one of the victims or one of the potential victims. This is what the scammer actually received back. Lulls number 2, please disregard this message. This was when Scatter Canary tried to scam up a couple victims, and they were doing check fraud. And what they did was they were sending the email to the victim by mistake of the listing of all the people that they were going to send. Y'all think that's funny? You should see the time when they actually tried to salvage that relationship and then continue scamming them afterward and everything. So, yeah, they actually tried to do that. Number 3, again, scammer to scammer communication. Your guy sucks. They went ahead and they had W-2s. They were trying to make the best of it and everything. And they tried to cash out, and they were like, hey, that stuff's crap. You need to do better than that. Lulls number 4, these are not the W-2s you're looking for. This was a case where a security organization sent an email out to the victims and everything, or it sent an email out to the scammer with the W-2s, and it made it through the entire BEC chain. Turns out the information was forged and faked. So I don't know where Shanahan Mouth FM is. I know the security company who did that, and I tip my hat to y'all. Kudos on that. Number 5, iTunes gift cards. When you go ahead and reverse engineer the number of characters that are on there, send the scammer 50 different accounts, and kind of play it up that, oh yeah, I'm taking this time over several hours in order to do this, and they get pissed off at you, and they're like, I had to check 50 different accounts. You better go back and verify every single one. So at some point, some poor SOB in Nigeria went and had to do that stuff. Oh, and turns out if you guys do the same stuff too, Arial font is a good one to use on that. Find out a good one. Here. Account direct deposit information. Turns out Green Dot is a bad bank to use when trying to get your accounts to go in. And this was actually a PDF that the scammers had used in order to try and get the human resources to going back and forth to them. Fastest copy paster in the West. They actually went and copy pasted this information during our engagement, and they said, here's the account in order to wire it to. They accidentally gave us the tax ID, the name of the person associated with the company. They gave us the account number, the username, and the password and everything. And then finally, one last more.